Ladies and gentlemen, James Watt.
This business is going to be one or two things. It's going to be a massive global success, or we're going to crash and burn completely.
How many times going from 0 to $1 billion do you reckon you were close to going bust?
We just kind of danced along this kind of knife edge of financial oblivion.
Are we going through the death of the UK right now?
We're raising taxes so much that the growth goes out of the system and the debt just kills everything.
They've kind of called you a toxic boss.
There's the amount of nonsense about us in the media. There's no company that can keep all of its employees happy all the time. Anything that's not sensational and extreme doesn't sell.
Why have entrepreneurs become the enemy?
The system is stacked against you.
Hallelujah to that. 3 core elements of growing a £1 billion company.
If you're trying to build something, there's got to be an...
I want to ask something which seems to be quite controversial, but...
I think that is completely the wrong question.
Are we going through the death of the UK right now?
I am so concerned about what's happening, and I think people who work in business have been kind of saying this for months, if not years, and I think we've just got the perfect storm of public services becoming worse and worse. Waiting lists at hospitals have never been longer. There's never been more kids in classrooms in school. Prisons are so full, they're putting dangerous criminals back in the street, so we're taxed incredibly highly. But if you look at the services we get for those taxes, it just doesn't stack up. If you look at business, if you look at the economy, it's so tough to be an entrepreneur in the UK. The system is stacked against you. We've got more millionaires, more wealth creators, more job creators leaving the UK than at any point in history. We're going to see hundreds of thousands, if not millions, lose their job when the national insurance increase comes in place in April. Unemployment figures are already off the charts. Inflation is spiking. I am incredibly concerned about the future of the UK economy at the moment.
So why are you sticking it out? Why are you staying here? Why are you flying the flag of Britain like I am? Why are you sticking it out?
I mean, if everyone leaves, like, what is the point in that? Like, I am from the UK. I'm passionate about building a business here. I've built my main business here, but I'm building other businesses here. My family live here. It's like where I'm from, and I think now is when the UK needs its best people to step up to the plate and kind of try and make a positive difference to what's happening. So I'm not jumping on a plane like to Dubai like so many other founders. I know I'm here for the long run. I'm very distraught at what's happening in the future of the UK, but I'm determined to do my bit to kind of try and make it better and to try and improve the standard of living for families all over the UK, which is on a severe downward trend at the moment.
Have Labour made it even worse?
Yeah, so Labour took on an incredibly difficult situation, and I'm like reasonably agnostic between political parties. I think the last Conservative government was massively inept, and I think it was not befitting of conservatism in any way, shape or form, the type of government we had. Labour took on an incredibly difficult situation, and the key thing they had to try and do was just not make the situation worse and give the economy a chance to recover, a chance to grow, a chance to create employment, a chance to create wealth, and they somehow managed to make the situation significantly worse. So I think they've done a terrible job so far. I've been very open in my criticism. I think they don't understand the economy. I don't think they understand the importance of job creation, taxes, how that works, and everything they did in the budget. I think it was vindictive. I think it was spiteful, and I think it was massively detrimental to everyone living in the UK.
So let's get positive for a minute.
Let's do it.
What 3 things would you change about the UK to fire up the economy again?
Oh, good question. So one of the things is something I'm doing myself anyway. So inspired by Dodge out in the US, I launched something called Shadow Dodge, but we've now changed them to Corgi, which we thought gave it a bit more of a kind of UK spin. So it's myself, and we've had over 200 amazing people volunteer to help with this initiative. We built an amazing team of 12. That's kind of high-level civil servants, amazing data scientists and engineers. So we are going to be publishing reports every 2 months as to what we find in terms of government spending and how we think government can spend their money more efficiently. And we're kind of caught in this vicious cycle of we've got to raise taxes, we've got way more debt than we should have as a country, we're spending hundreds of billions to service that debt. Because we're raising taxes, we're not getting the economic growth that we need, therefore we've got to kind of raise taxes further, and we just need something to break that vicious cycle. So what we want to do with Corgi is to say, hey, there's another way. If we can take a private sector approach to incentivization, spend control, cost control to the public sector, maybe we can show that there is a way that we can push forward in the UK without having to hike taxes further and without having to compromise in the public services, which is important for everyone. So that's one of the key things I'm doing. I've also suggested...
Can I just ask you about that then?
Yes, absolutely.
Because there was a question on my list. So you're the UK version of Elon Musk.
I would love that comparison because he's one of my absolute idols, but I think they're a kind of official government organisation, so we're like the kind of shadowy, underground, unofficial cousin of what he's doing in the US.
Third cousin.
Yes, third cousin. We'll go with third cousin.
So what you're attempting to do is to create some kind of open source or transparency on basically where the wastage is.
Yes, exactly. So we have got some amazing data scientists. We're taking data from all the sources we can. We're using loads of freedom of information requests and just publishing, okay, if we're spending 1.27 trillion this year, how is that spent? How has that changed over 20 years? Which parts of public spending, for instance, healthcare, have been increasing way higher than inflation, but then services being taken down. So understanding how that 1.27 trillion is spent and then looking at ways that can be more efficient. Some of the kind of crazy things that we've found so far, the average pension in the public sector is 26%, if you compare that to the private sector. The amount of credit cards that public sector employees have, I think, is off the charts. And just firsthand as an entrepreneur, the easiest way to control spend in your company is not to give your team credit cards because it's a kind of very slippery slope on there. So we've found some really interesting things so far, and we want to just keep doing that and just be completely open source, politically agnostic, publish this. And like Warren Buffett, who's one of my absolute idols, always comes back to one point, which is making sure you've got the incentives in the right place in the system. And I just don't think the public sector takes that approach. So anyone, in my view, who's spending money in the public sector should be on a direct cash bonus and they receive a percentage of what they save. And that mentality just doesn't exist at all there. So yeah, there'll be reports coming every 2 months, coming soon. We're Corgi Global on Twitter. We're corgi.global online. We're building an amazing team of volunteers who are helping us, and we're getting completely open source and transparent with everything we do, but trying to find a path forward that doesn't involve raising taxes so much that the growth goes out of the system and the debt just kills everything.
Hallelujah to that. So because you mentioned before we have to put up taxes, and I talk to a lot of politicians, and they don't seem to understand basic finance. If you're a company and you have $1 million a month overhead, you could probably knock that overhead down to 800 grand a month if you lean up a bit. Surely the UK company could spend 20% less and wouldn't have to keep putting taxes up, surely. Surely there's wastage everywhere.
But if we can find out, exactly, I agree, but if we can find a way to spend 10% less, it's like well over 100 billion a year. And that can make us from this country that's kind of struggling for kind of relevance and growth in its place in the world at the moment to one of the best countries on the planet just by finding 10% of cost savings.
And why do you think there's so much wastage in government?
I think it's just a very different approach to ownership, to kind of management of that cash. I think
because it's not their money.
Because it's not their money. I think how the incentives work, and there's no incentive at the moment for them to focus like a junkyard Rottweiler in every single penny that they spend. I mean, if you guys have all got businesses, like if you don't fight for every single penny, the business dies. It is that black or white. 95% of startup businesses in the UK go out of business. The most common reason they go out of business is the founder isn't focused enough in managing the spend within that organization. So
they run out of cash.
So you run out of cash. So everyone in business knows this. Every single penny is the difference between life and death in your business, and that's how you run a successful business. And that's just a million miles away from the public sector approach to spend.
Right. So you would like to see politicians with incentives. So, for example, if they went under budget, they might get a personal commission themselves, you mean?
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
So not so much for politicians, but for the people managing that spend within public bodies.
So the civil servants.
The kind of high-level ones who are in control of spend. So anyone, I think, who's in control of a pot of cash being spent, if they can make a saving, they should get a tiny percent of that saving back in terms of the bonus.
Which is exactly how it would be in a business.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm running, let's say, my Australian operation, and we've got $2 million Australian dollars of overhead in that business, I can sit down and say to my CEO, okay, if you can save 20% off of that, I'm going to give you 2% of that back into your annual pay packet. And it's incredibly effective to get them to do that. So they're saving their money, they're putting money into their pocket as well.
I want to ask something which seems to be quite controversial, but are politicians paid enough?
No, it's not controversial in any way, shape or form. And With what I've done, managed to spend a lot of time with politicians and politicians in Scotland, and you get people running the finances for Scotland who I wouldn't give a job as a mid-level management accountant. So like, how can you pay the person who's in charge of finances for Scotland 75,000? It just doesn't work in any way, shape or form. We need to get the best, the brightest, the most cutting edge person in finance running the finances for the nation, because that impacts everyone in that country. And if you pay £75,000 for a finance minister, you get a mid-level management accountant at best who's completely out of their depth trying to run the country's finances. For me, politicians are so important, and we need the best, the smartest people there. You don't get that if you pay what we pay at the moment.
So let's say you were running the UK, you'd be paying them more and rehiring the best.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. But making sure the incentives are in the right place as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked you for 3 things that you would do to, make Britain great again. You mentioned about Corgi, the UK version of Doge. What other 2 things would you do?
I think we've got to find a way to have a tax system in place that keeps the people in the UK that we need to be here. This doesn't work at all with the amount of fantastic people that are leaving the UK at the moment. These are the job creators, the wealth creators, the people who pay a disproportionate percentage of taxes. Twice as many millionaires are leaving the UK at any point in time. And it's not just it's like their future innovation. So the amount of people that I know that have built a business in the UK to escape the tax regime, the regulation, the media climate, all of these things, when they get to selling their business, they sell it, they move to Dubai, so they don't have to pay the capital gains tax, but they start their next business in Dubai where they're paying no tax at all. So the UK isn't only losing their taxes, they're losing the job creation, the wealth creation, the innovation that comes in their next business as well. We've got to have a system where we're historically a nation of entrepreneurs. The innovation from the UK helps shape the modern world. You can't do that if all the best people are leaving because the system is set up to disincentivize them so much. So got to find a way to keep the best people here.
Okay, that's the second thing. What about the third thing you'd do?
Third thing I would do is, again, looking at kind of reform for businesses. So for me, for the UK economy to be as strong as it possibly can be, we've got to sell things overseas. So if a business starts in the UK and only sells in the UK, the economic impact of that is positive, but almost close to zero because you're displacing someone else's business in the UK. So if any of you guys start a business in the UK and you're only selling in the UK, if we've got negative economic growth or no economic growth, that doesn't really help the UK economy that much because you're just displacing someone else's business in the UK. So as an island nation, we've got to be so focused on export, we've got to be so focused on international, because then you're not displacing any jobs in the UK and you're adding wealth, jobs, taxes, kind of everything that we want in the UK. And as a company, we started exporting so early in the journey just because nobody wanted to buy our beer in the UK, so we had to sell it overseas because otherwise we simply wouldn't have survived. And there's so much things that the government do in terms of kind of economic development agencies, and they're just all a complete waste of time. You can look at things like Business Gateway in Scotland, huge cost, no help to anyone looking to set up a business. So I would take all the money that's spent in the economic development agencies, I would shut them all down, and I would put for any company in its first 10 years a 5% reverse export tax in place. So let's say you're making cheese and you're selling it internationally. Let's say you're making jumpers and you're selling it internationally. Let's say you're making wooden chest sets, you're selling them internationally. For every £100 that you sell internationally, you get a 5% kickback for the government. It would be deductible against the other taxes that you pay, but it just gives you a heavy incentive to sell overseas. And it's us making things, services, products, ideas, innovation in the UK and selling them internationally. It's ultimately going to help us build the nation that we want.
Right. And what do you think about the idea of giving businesses tax breaks for their startup year, or increasing their taxes incrementally, like 0 corp tax year 1, 10% corp tax year 2, etc. What do you think of that kind of incentive?
Yeah, I think, and there's so many things that can be done. Anything that helps people start up businesses and scale businesses and get businesses kind of past that 5-year mark is so important. More than half of the jobs in the UK come from small to medium companies, and it's important to cross the spectrum, and it's just the odds are so stacked against you, and the long-term value this gives to our country in terms of jobs and taxes, innovations off the chart. So anything that can be done to make it easier for people to start our businesses and to give them a better chance of being in business after 5 years, I think would be massively net beneficial to the UK.
So this sounds like, to me, common sense.
You would think.
Yeah. So why don't Labour get it and why didn't Conservatives get it? Why have entrepreneurs become the enemy if this is common sense?
I think it's so interesting. So I spend so much time in the US, and I think the attitude in the US compared to the UK when it comes to success is markedly different. And I think in the US, everyone is so inculcated with American dream. When they see someone being successful, they think that could be me. Go you, that's amazing. In the UK, we don't have that same approach. So when people in the UK, the media, whoever, people on social media, see someone being successful, the first response is a bit of kind of cynicism, a bit of kind of distrust, a bit of resentment. And I think one of the reasons why so many entrepreneurs are leaving is just how entrepreneurs are kind of portrayed in the media in the UK, and just a kind of UK attitude towards success, I think makes it difficult as well.
So you think we need a cultural change?
I think that would massively help as well, yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. In fact, I don't know if you remember, but this show used to be called Disruptive Entrepreneur. Interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs here. In fact, most of my friends are entrepreneurs. One of them who's been a friend for 20 years is Daniel Priestley, who's the founder of Score App. So if you want consistent leads and sales and you're an entrepreneur, you need to listen to this. Because Daniel Priestley has built this amazing tool and it helps entrepreneurs attract leads at scale online using interactive assessments and quizzes. Score App turns your traffic into a steady stream of qualified leads day and night. It's like having a lead generation machine working 24/7, 365, so you can focus on growing your business. So if you go right now to scoreapp.com/Rob, you can use a ready-made template or an AI on Score App, and you can get your first leads attracted within the next 60 minutes. Go right now to scoreapp.com/Rob. You know, they've kind of called you a toxic boss, haven't
Yes,
they?
so many times, yeah.
Why have they called you a toxic boss? What's a toxic boss?
I asked myself the same question so many times. So, like, we were famously or infamously hit by this kind of open letter back in 2020. And at that time, we had, I think it was like 7,000 former colleagues, because so much of our team members work in the hospitality side of our business. Even the best hospitality business, the kind of average tenure is kind of 12 months. So high staff turnover and kind of what we do. 60 of our former colleagues kind of wrote this open letter saying that we had a culture of fear, that we were too intense, that we were too demanding, that I was a bad boss, like all of these things. Like 60 out of like 7,000 former team, it's like way, way less than 1%. And like with the best will in the universe, there's no company that can keep all of its employees happy all the time. And like, we always want to be the best company we can to work for. We always think that our long-term destiny is going to be determined by how we look after the fantastic people in our business. But there's always going to be a tiny amount of people who don't love the experience, who don't love the pace, the intensity. And at that time, we were growing close to 100% year on year. Anyone that's worked in a business doing that, it can get a little bit intense if you're growing that quickly, and some things can fall through cracks and you just can't focus on everything. And like, some people absolutely love the opportunities for personal growth and career growth that come from that environment. For other people, it's not quite right for them. So yeah, we had a bit of a backlash from a tiny number of former employees who didn't love working for us. It just got blown way out of proportion.
And how did you deal with the bad publicity?
I mean, it's such an interesting thing. So like, for me, there's like things that you can control and there's things that you can't control. So for me, any emotional energy that goes on things that you can't control is wasted energy. So just focus on what you can control. So like, within 18 months of that open letter, we were back in the Sunday Times best 100 companies to work for in the UK from an anonymous study from our team. So for us, try and tune out the noise, focus on like what we're doing. Like, everyone who knows our company and knows us knows what we're about, knows how we do things. So yeah, just don't worry about it too much and focus on being the best that we can be day to day.
Do you think that anyone who's broadly or vastly successful is going to have to endure that kind of problem, that kind of hate, that kind of jealousy? Is it a rite of passage of being successful?
I think we're seeing it kind of more and more in the UK. If I just look at kind of other entrepreneurs that have been successful and that kind of approach in the media, and I think we've always kind of had this interesting relationship with the media kind of ever since we started. And I'm not sure, it just kind of blown up into like a big storm over the last couple of years, but I'm definitely seeing it happen more and more in the UK, which I think is another reason why the people we want to have in the UK are leaving. Anything that's not sensational and extreme doesn't sell newspapers, doesn't get clicks, doesn't work in the media. So anything that's a good news story that's positive, it's just not what people click on. It's not what people can read on and stuff. And like, some of the things are just crazy. I made a joke I made a joke, which was obviously a joke, I think it was 2 months ago, that I was considering postponing my wedding to save £2,500 of tax because I just made an investment in my fiance's company and I wouldn't qualify for EIS tax relief if I became a related party through marriage, which was obviously a joke. And it ended up with like 25 newspaper articles that I was considering delaying my marriage to save taxes when it was a joke post. So it's like so many of these things, you just have to kind of laugh it off.
Well, I mean, everyone knows that a marriage costs you half your wealth. So why would you? Okay, so let's change subject. If you could give us 3 core elements of growing a £1 billion company.
Oh, good question.
No pressure or anything.
We had this test that we always use. So we set up in an industry that was completely dominated by global behemoths that were thousands of times our size, and we were 2 humans and 1 dog in a derelict dystopian shed in the northeast of Scotland. Like, how do you compete with that? So we introduced 2 tests that became fundamental to everything that we did. So test 1 was, would or could another beer company do this thing? And if the answer was yes, we wouldn't do it. So would or could another beer company sponsor a sports team? Yes, okay. We're not going to do that. Would or could another beer company spend £200,000 taking out these adverts? Yes, we're not going to do that. Would or could another beer company do the social media thing? Yes, so we're not going to do that. So we had to find things that our competitors weren't creative, innovative, edgy, bold enough to do, which has led to us throwing taxidermy cats out of a helicopter over the Bank of England. It's led to us driving a tank through the streets of London. It's led to us making a beer at the bottom of the ocean. It's led to us making a 55% beer and package it in taxidermy and stoats and squirrels. It's led to us being involved in a battle with a German beer business to make the strongest beer on the planet. It's led to us taking a stand passionately for the things that we believe in, and these are things that other beer companies just wouldn't do. So then we're able to close that gap. The second test is, if we spend £10 on a thing, can we guarantee that that return is going to be 10 times better than one of our competitors' pounds? So if I'm going to spend £1, I need to know that I'm going to get a 10x return versus a Heineken, versus a Stella, versus a Budweiser, versus a Foster's. Because if I get the same return for each pound that I spend, they're going to remain massive and I'm going to remain tiny, and I'm never going to be able to close that gap. And that was, again, a lens that we used. So like all that activity went through these lenses. Would or could another beer company do this? And then secondly, can I get a 10x return? So for us, those 2 things were absolutely key. So that's kind of 1 point. Secondly, like, we just weren't afraid to take a risk as a business. And like from day one, I would always joke with Martin and say, like, this business is going to be 1 or 2 things. It's going to be a massive global success, or we're going to crash and burn completely. But that is totally fine because the space in between is completely boring, and that doesn't interest me at all. Before I set up the business, I was captain of a North Atlantic fishing boat. I loved it. All my best buddies are still people that I work with in the fishing boat. So I always thought, hey, if we take a massive gamble and it doesn't work out, I'm back in the fishing boat, which is amazing because I love being in the fishing boat. It's like all good, happy days. So we were always prepared to double down, to take risk. And like, a safe strategy is almost too risky. Safe gets lost, safe is boring. Like, you've got to be able to take smart, calculated risks and kind of double down on that. And then the third point is all about community. So I think any business, and like, I'm amazed at like more people don't speak about this. Any business that's a consumer product, you've got one simple metric. Can you engage your community better than your competition? If you can win. If you don't, you can lose. And like, so many people as well confuse audience and customers with community, and they're fundamentally different things. I invest in a lot of businesses, and I'll often ask them, tell me about your community. And they're like, oh, we've got 20,000 followers on Instagram. And I feel like shaking them. Like, that's not a community, that is an audience. Like, community, it needs to be 2-way communication. You need to build things together. So here's some examples of things that we did at Brewdog to kind of build and engage that community. So we have got a business model called Equity for Punks. So we've got 227,000 tiny shareholders in our business. These are our customers, our fans, our advocates, our harshest critics at the time, but like, they're so bought in with us in the journey. We do our AGM up in Aberdeen, which is like, we kind of do all the business stuff, but we've got amazing music and beers, but we've had up to 20,000 people attend our AGM, which must make it one of the best attended AGMs on the planet. We develop our products in collaboration with our community. So we'd always do something called a prototype challenge. So it's like, hey, community, we're going to launch a new beer next year. Here's 4 options. So we make those 4 options. We sell them cheaply to our community. We put them in tap in our bars, but our community vote as to which of those beers goes into our lineup. Anyone that knows our beers, amazing beers like Hazy Jane and Jackhammer, they came out of our prototype challenge. Our community help us with the beers that we make. In terms of bar location, so we offered our community £5,000 to help us find a bar location. It's way cheaper than paying an agent, but like, these are the people who are going to be our customers. So we've found an amazing site in Bristol, but it's our community there who get to go to that site, so they're going to give us a much better objective opinion. Saves me £25,000 because I'm not paying an agent. The community member loves it because they get the money, but they also get the kudos of finding the site. But then I know it's good for the community because the community found it. And for me, I just think any business that touches consumer, you've got one metric. How do I engage my community better than the competition? If I can, not only can I win, I can wipe the floor with them. And if I can't, I'm just going to struggle to stay in business the whole time.
So it sounds like you quite enjoyed being David versus the Goliaths.
Oh, I think being a challenger brand just gives you such an amazing opportunity if you're kind of bold enough to lead into it. And for me, like kind of classic UK challenger brand story was kind of mid-90s when it was kind of Virgin against British Airways, and just like that approach, that kind of mindset, that kind of devil-may-care irreverence, if you can like hardwire that in. So like being a challenger, and like so much about business is storytelling. So you're storytelling to kind of try and connect with your consumer, connect with your community, and being a challenger just gives you so many amazing stories that you can tell to connect emotionally.
How many times going from 0 to £1 billion do you reckon you were close to going bust?
Oh, every single day for 5 years. But it's like, and I couldn't pay myself at all for the first 5 years of the business. Myself and Martin both moved back in with our parents. I was staying in my dad's tiny spare room until I was 31 years old. Martin was sleeping in his mum's sofa. And like every month, there was so much pressure just to be able to pay our teams. And we just kind of danced along this kind of knife edge of financial oblivion every single month. But that was also, and it was like high stress, but it was so intentional. Again, I worked with so many founders, so many startup businesses. Like there's constraints. Like if you've got a startup, if you've got a scale-up business, your day job is managing constraint after constraint after constraint. That is the nature of the game that you play. And one of the biggest constraints is resources, namely cash. And for me, if we weren't teetering on the edge of financial oblivion, I wasn't working every single penny of cash that I had hard enough, because I had to open new markets. I had to try and find a way to employ new salespeople. I had to find a way to open new locations. And it was just like, how close can I take this to the edge? And we've had to do so many things, like the amount of phone calls I had to make to distribution partners at the end of the month to say, okay, we've sent you 2 containers of beer to Sweden. I know you're not due to pay us for 60 days. I'll give you a 10% discount, but you just need to pay that cash to me tomorrow because I need to be able to pay my team because they need to pay their rent the next day. And like that was our existence for kind of 5, 6, 7 years, but I wouldn't have had it any other way, because by being that close to the edge, and it's not for the faint of heart at all, but being that close to the edge meant that I knew I was getting every percentage point of growth possible from that amount of cash that I had.
Are you a sadomasochist?
I don't even know what that is.
No, I don't really. I just thought it sounded good.
I'm going to go no. But the biggest story that we had of kind of almost going out of business, so it was back in 2009, and we got an order to send a whole shipping container of beer to America. So for the first 5 years of the business, I was also still working part-time as a captain of a fishing boat just to get some type of income, and most of that income went into the beer business. But like massive deal for us. It was £25,000 order, and we were launching in America. So we sent the beer in the container, and then I flew out a few weeks later to meet the distributor in Los Angeles and do some tasting events to launch our business in America. And I got there, tasted the beer, and just wanted to curl up and die. It was the first container we'd sent internationally, so we didn't realize how hot it was going to get in the journey. And it went through Panama Canal, past the equator, up to Los Angeles. And this amazing, delicious beer that we made just sat cooking in this hot steel box for 2.5 months. And it got there and the beer was completely destroyed. The distributor was like, well, James, I can't pay you for the beer because nobody's going to buy this beer. And like I had to cancel all the events, all the tastings, all the media things that I had lined up. I flew back, and then the distributor's like, well, we can't pay you. So like with £10,000 in the bank account at that time. And it was actually on the flight back. I was like, what the hell am I going to do? And I came up with this idea, equity for punks. It was like, okay, we've got no money at all. if we could somehow find a way to shorten the distance between ourselves and the people who enjoy the beer that we make, if we can find a way to take them on this journey with us, and they can invest and get an equity stake in this business. So this was equity crowdfunding before equity crowdfunding even existed. I spoke to 5 different legal companies. They all told me what I'm trying to do was illegal and impossible, and I just couldn't do it. Undeterred. And like, I think as an entrepreneur, every time you hear no, like you just need, it's not no, it's just like try again, but up your level a little bit. So I went to see a 6th legal company. It's like, well, James, very, very difficult. It's going to cost £100,000. We're going to need this audit and this certification and this verification and this partner. But if you want to do it, we'll give it a go with you. So signed a contract to do it with this legal company to launch equity for punks. I didn't tell them that we'd only £10,000 in the bank at the time. So we gambled the entire future of our business and making this completely unknown, untried, untested business model work. Nobody had ever done it before back then. If it didn't work, I was 100% back in the fishing boat. Luckily, we raised the first time £570,000. So we paid the legal fees, we got some money in the business, and that's been a key part of our business going forward. But like, we heard 5 no's from legal advisors, we kept going, and we gambled everything in this crazy idea that no one had done before.
Do you get a kick out of being close to the edge? I think that's what I meant by masochist. It sounds like you love being on the edge.
I always think like risk is proportional to ambition. So the more ambitious you are, the more risk you've got to be willing to undertake. And for me, I just love the feeling that you get where you've put everything on the line for something you believe in, where you've taken a massive gamble. I think it sharpens you. And I think like if you've got no option but to make it work, you find a way to make it work. And like the history of our company is just that time and time again. Another great example is the facility we built in America. So we've got a 52-acre campus in Columbus, Ohio. Time magazine put it as one of their best 100 places on the planet a couple of years ago. We've got an amazing beer hotel, we've got lakes, we've got dog parks, we've got beer museums. It's absolutely gorgeous there. But it was back in 2016, we decided we should build something in America. And myself and Martin were hosting a TV show about beer over there. The funniest thing about the beer TV show was we had to argue with the TV producers from Los Angeles for 2 months because they wanted to use subtitles because they thought Americans wouldn't understand our Scottish accent. But we managed to avoid...
English people don't understand.
No, just like empty faces. So I decided, okay, let's take advantage of this. Let's build something in America. So I spent 7 days visiting 7 different cities in America. I went to Cleveland, I went to Charleston, I went to Boston, I went to Chicago, I went to Columbus, I went to Richmond in Virginia, and I just really liked Columbus. The mayor came out and had dinner with me, and I was there for less than 24 hours, but I got a really good vibe. So I got back and sat down with Neil, who was my CFO, and Martin, who was my co-founder, and I was like, okay, I know you guys have never been to Columbus, Ohio. I know I've spent less than 24 hours there. I know we've done no feasibility or diligence whatsoever. I know this is going to cost us $40 million that we don't have, and we've got no idea how we're going to get, but we should definitely build this thing. And they were like, okay, why not? So phoned up, bought the land, found a way to make it work, and our US has been a fantastic business for us since then.
Do you have to be do or die to be a successful entrepreneur, or could you just do it a bit more slowly?
Oh, there's so many different styles of fantastically successful entrepreneurs. Like I've got a style that has worked for me, and that's kind of based on my personality and how I think and how I like to do things. But like I'm fortunate enough to be able to meet like so many amazingly successful people, and they're all so different. So I don't think there's like one profile, one way of thinking. And I think it's so important you decide what you listen to as a founder, because everyone, even if they've got zero experience, is all of a sudden going to be an expert and tell you what to do. So you've got to tune out enough of the noise, but you've also got to find a way of doing this that works for you. And like building any business is like such a slog. It's so intense. You get so many knockbacks, you get so many kicks, you've got so many problems to solve. And you can only sustain that over a period of time if you do it in a way that is authentic to you. So if you've got a style that's not your own, or you're trying to copy someone else's style, I think that just kind of sets you up to failure. How can you take your style, your approach, and just sharpen it and make it as effective as it can be? But what I love about the successful entrepreneurs that I know, like a lot of them think and do things very differently in their approach.
So you don't have to try and spend every penny and stay on that knife edge for 5 years. You could build a bit more slow, for example.
Oh yeah, and there's so many fantastic businesses, and everyone's got a different reason for setting up a business, and I think everyone's got a different objective as to what they want to do. It's like from day one, And we didn't tell anyone because it just sounded completely delusional. But like, we wanted to build a unicorn. That was like our thing. We wanted to build a unicorn and build an amazing international beer business. Now, if our goal had been to like build a fantastic 100 or 200 million business, would we have been on the edge all that time? No. Would we have taken those massive gambles? No. Could we have still built a fantastic business? Absolutely. So just depends so much on the objectives and what you're trying to do and how your appetite for risk is and kind of where you want to get to and how you want to plot that course to get there.
I know they said you're a toxic boss, and look, I know you, James, and I don't believe it, but I do imagine you're demanding and at times hard to work for. Would that be fair?
I think anyone, if you're trying to build something, there's got to be an insistence on standards, and I make no apology for that at all. And I think there's a saying in the military, as soon as you see something that's below standard and you don't say anything, you've set a new standard. And like, what people don't understand is business is insanely competitive. All your competitors want to crush you and want to be you to be out of business. And like, for me, business is like a sports team. So if you think of like Alex Ferguson, who's here, like all the best managers have always got to insist on a certain level of performance. Now, I believe in paying people incredibly well for delivering fantastic performance. I believe in giving all my team members equity, and I've given them some of my own equity. I believe in putting in place an amazing incentive and bonus packages, but anything that is quick moving, that is trying to disrupt, that is taking on bigger competition at scale, like you've got to have certain standards within the business. And some people love a business that works like that and has that pace and intensity, and it gives so much opportunity for development. And other people don't like it, but that's okay. Like, not every single person has got to like every single business.
Would you say you're ruthless?
Not more than I think I have to be. But like, again, like being a CEO, your day is non-stop decisions, and the better quality decisions you make, the better your business is going to do. And like sometimes, and I don't think I'm any more ruthless than any other good CEO, but sometimes you've got to make tough decisions. And we would always say, okay, let's make tough decisions, but execute them as compassionately as we can, because we know, okay, so we want to get kind of good notice periods and references and all of these things. But unless you're sometimes let people go, you're never going to have an excellent business. And like, not every person is going to be right for each business. But am I more ruthless than any other CEO that's built a business of scale? I don't think so.
So, James,
yes,
I'm getting this overwhelming feeling that you have a different relationship with fear and failure to most mere mortals. Now, let me expand. I just saw this guy. There's actually a Netflix documentary about him who does that free climbing, you know, who literally has no support on a vertical rock going up thousands of feet, and he's just using his fingers. On the edge of death, no fear of failure. I'm just not getting any fear of failure from you. And I think many people live in a state of fear of failure. Do you fear failure?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because, and I think anyone, like so many people I know that have built fantastic businesses, like everyone's like compensating for some type of inadequacy. They've got some type of demon kind of driving them on. They've got some like voice from their childhood telling them they're not good enough. They're never going to amount to anything. They're never going to achieve anything. And like the only reason I feel failure is nothing externally, but I know it gives that voice in my head a bit more power than it should have. But like for me, like there's a few things that I think when it comes to risk. A, it's always proportional to ambition. So if you're going to be insanely ambitious, you need to find a way to get comfortable with risk. And we've taken risk after risk after risk. But I think it sharpens you, it focuses you, it gives you a bit of kind of intensity, it gives you a bit of an edge, it gives you a bit of drive. If you've got no option but to make something work, I think you'll find a way. Whereas if it's not life or death for the business, then I think it's kind of easy not to kind of do what you have to do to kind of make that work. And for me, it was always like, if this doesn't work and I'm back in the fishing boat, amazing, because I loved being back in the fishing boat, but I just don't want to not be ambitious enough and not take enough risks, because I want to build something remarkable and something of skill.
So it sounds like you went all in on the business, go big or go home, but you actually did have your peaceful backup plan.
Yeah, I mean, I loved being in the fishing boat, and yeah, I'm glad the business worked out, but I was equally happy catching mackerel in the North Atlantic.
But we all just need to work our new plan B. Right, Brewdog, what's your current role? Because when I first met you, I don't think you could really speak about it.
No.
Can you now?
Yes. So I set up the business with my best friend Martin in 2007. I ran that business as CEO for 17 and a half years. Now my role's I'm still the largest shareholder of the business. It's captain, and I'm an advisor to the business. And I love that business. It's my absolute baby. The mission, the people, the beer, the locations. Like I spent last night in Brewdog Waterloo, which is our flagship London location. But at the same time, I never wanted to do one single thing for 17 and a half years or do kind of one single thing forever. And like all my idols are fantastic entrepreneurs. And for me, the hallmark of a kind of truly fantastic entrepreneur is somebody that's not just built one remarkable business, but 2 or 3 remarkable businesses. And after 17 and a half years, I got to the point of, unless I give myself the opportunity to do something, I might just be like, do this forever, which I would have loved as well, but I wanted to challenge myself and I wanted to still be involved in Brewdog. It's my baby and I love it, but I wanted to give myself the kind of opportunity and the challenge to like, okay, James, if you think you're a good business person, let's see what you've got. Let's put everything in line again. And let's see if you can build 1 or 2 more fantastic businesses and hopefully 1 or 2 more unicorns.
So you weren't happy with a unicorn by definition is like only one by definition. So you want another unicorn.
Hope so.
You're not tired after 17 years of being on the edge?
No, but I think it's a really important thing. And again, it's something I don't speak about is I think anyone who's running a business, you've got to think of yourself as a professional sports person or a professional athlete. The quality of your energy, your focus, your mental acuity, your physical health, your mental well-being is massively, massively important. Everyone gets the same amount of hours in a day, young, old, rich, poor, successful, unsuccessful. The better you can use your hours, the more successful you're going to be. And the better you look after yourself, the better you're going to be able to use those hours. So I do so many slightly unusual, kind of crazy things over the course of a day to make sure that when I'm working, which is a lot of hours, I'm taking the best version of myself to work and performing at my absolute best. And I think of it as like, in terms of my focus, my energy, my mental acuity, I need to think of myself the same way that a football team would think of their kind of star asset in terms of their kind of match fitness for what they do. So I do ice baths every single day. I do infrared saunas. I do breathing exercises every single day. I do a lot of health and fitness stuff. I go in hyperbaric chambers a few times a week.
You've done Zooms in them, haven't
I've done Zooms in them. But I try and do a lot of kind of my meetings, walking meetings. Like all my colleagues are very used to kind of going for a walk. So we kind of do the business things, but like we're moving, we're outside, we're getting kind of fresh air. So I think just looking after yourself, your energy levels, I think there's this kind of myth among kind of entrepreneurs that, okay, like 3 or 4 or 5 hours worth of sleep is a badge of honor. And like there's been periods where I've had to do that over the course of years, but like those are not the periods where I'm performing at my best. So the better you can look after yourself, I think the better quality of decisions you can make. So I think it's something that everyone running a business absolutely needs to do.
And what about managing stress? Because, you know, fast growth is very stressful and stress can be a debilitator, even a killer. So how have you learned to manage higher levels of stress?
I think it's being so focused on how I use my own time. So how many hours you work in a day is one thing. The quality of that work is another thing. And I think so many people, it's my bugbear with so many of the founders I work with just now, they work in such a distracted, unfocused, unproductive way. So they do, let's say, 8 or 9 hours of work, but it's probably only the equivalent to kind of 2.5 hours. Here's a great example. Who has flown to America in a day flight in the last couple of years? Okay, so a few years. So day flight to America, I take them quite often, 8, 9, 10 hours, and I love working on that flight, and you can do it with no distractions. The amount of work that you can do if you set yourself up to work in a focused way as opposed to a distracted way is off the charts. So I'm like so militant about how I use my time. So firstly, I love batching tasks. If you switch between anything, you'll lose like 13, 14 minutes of focus. And so many people, they'll have a Zoom meeting, they'll send a few emails, they'll do a call, they'll have another meeting, they'll dip in a few emails, they'll put together a presentation. They're just losing so much momentum each time in terms of deep focus that they switch tasks. So I batch tasks. If I'm doing meetings, I'm doing up to 8 or 10 meetings back to back. There's no meeting in my calendar that's ever more than 30 minutes because it's just unnecessary. If I'm answering emails for at least 2 hours. And I've usually got an autoresponder on saying I'm only going to reply to emails only every second day, because an email inbox is essentially a to-do list where anyone on the planet can add an item. And I also, my favorite thing to do, twice a week, I do 2 3.5 hour deep focus strategy blocks. So all of my devices go off. I've got a do not disturb until the zombies sign that goes in my door. I've got noise cancelling headphones, and I've got big notepads. And like anyone who's running a business, you're trying to build the future. You can't build and imagine the future if you're so concerned with day to day. And if you're constantly available on your devices, all you're doing is managing little bits and pieces day to day. You don't have that strategic vision. All my best ideas, all the things that add the value are the things that I do when I've got that kind of 3.5 hour strategy block. And it requires a bit of discipline, because if you're hopping about between different things, usually the first hour, my head isn't in that deep thinking phase, and I've just got to like sit with that uncomfortableness. I've got to get a little bit bored, and then the head starts working once it's been disconnected from the WhatsApp group and the Slack channel and the emails and the meeting and the this and that. It's like an impossible way to be creative. So I would encourage all of you to do that exercise. And maybe start off doing it once a week, start off with 3 hours, no distractions, no devices, no meetings, no people, and just focus on the future of your business. And the founders that I work with, the kind of question that I give them to kind of think about in that first session was, if you had to double the size of your business in 12 months, tell me how you would do that. So blue sky thinking, blank sheet of paper. But if you don't, somebody's going to kidnap you or shoot you, or you've got to go back to your day job or something, like for your business to survive, it's got to be twice the size in 12 months. What would you do? But give yourself enough time to think about that deeply, differently, from different angles. And it's amazing what can come out of your head if you just give it the time and space to think. And I think so many people are guilty at the moment of just not giving themselves that time and space to think.
I've got a quote from you here.
Uh-oh.
It's all right. We've done the tricky stuff. The UK is one of the world's least work-orientated countries. Why did you say that? Why do you believe that?
So I didn't say that. So that was, well, I did say that, but it was actually from a study. So there was a study at Imperial College. It kind of showed the UK was one of the least work-orientated countries out of the 20 countries it studied. And we often joke about kind of French productivity. They were significantly more productive than UK. In America, significantly more by a distance as well. And like as a country, the kind of biggest indicator of how well our economy is doing is kind of productivity per head. And like in a business, like every business knows that you can spend within your means. Kind of pretty much every family knows that you can spend within your means. So if you want X, Y, and Z, then you need to work hard enough and be creative enough to kind of earn the income to get X, Y, and Z. And I think just as a country, we've fallen into this trap of we want things like reduced working hours and 4-day work week and work from home and all these fantastic things, but it's got a knock-on impact of productivity per head. And with how low productivity per head is in the UK at the moment, it just means that we can't invest the levels we want in the services that we need. We can't have the economic growth that drives prosperity for every single family in the UK. And that you just can't have it both ways. So if we're going to have that approach to work, that's going to have consequences with where the UK sits globally and kind of all these other things. And like all the data has shown that we've got a big problem with productivity in the UK at the moment.
And what do you think about Elon Musk coming in and saying half the government buildings are empty, so you've all got to come back to work? Oh, and by the way, we'll offer you a few months severance. Just reply saying, I resign. Because that's what they did. What do you think of that?
I'm a massive Elon fan. I think he's got some amazing ideas. I just think what he's built with SpaceX, and I've been an investor since the early days in SpaceX. With Tesla, I've been a kind of huge Tesla fan, a huge Tesla customer for ages. And he's kind of probably way more savage and kind of brutal in his approach than I am. He probably makes me look like a kind of pussycat in comparison with kind of how extreme he is in certain things. But I think he's got a valid point. And I think if the US is successful in taking fat and waste out of their government, other countries are going to be forced to follow suit, which can't be a bad thing.
And as someone in the beer industry, are you worried about how Labour are maybe damaging pubs and the leisure industry?
I just think hospitality at the moment is especially tough with costs. I mean, more pubs closed in the UK last year than at any point in history, the amount of pubs that are closing. And like, I'm biased because I've got a heap of pubs in the UK, but I think they play such an important role in our communities as well, like getting people together. There's like a loneliness epidemic with more and more people from working from home. You don't have that human connection. Like, what is the value of getting people together, having that face-to-face connection, having those conversations? And if we've got less and less
like
places,
a social club, isn't it?
Yeah, they're such an important part of the fabric of our society. And like the cost base for pubs has just gone up exponentially. At the same time, people have got less money to spend. So they're kind of caught between, do I open the doors? Do I put the heating on? Do I put my prices up so much that people can't come in? And I'm very concerned about the future of pubs in the UK. And like, we've now got a bit of scale and we're internationally, it's like our business is okay, but it's like the kind of independent owner operated pubs that I think are just so important. And the odds are definitely stacked against them at the moment. I think it's got such an adverse impact on society, our site in the UK, if they keep closing at the rate they are at the moment.
So this show, this podcast is called Disruptors. And as I said, it used to be called Disruptive Entrepreneur. So can you give us 3 top tips to be disruptive, to be David that beats Goliath?
Okay, so I think you've got to have a very clear sense of purpose. So like our business was always to make other people's passionate about fantastic beer as we are. Like we absolutely love beer. We hated how the big companies had demonized and bastardized and commoditized this amazing, magical, mythical liquid. And we wanted to put the taste, the flavor, the passion, the artisan craftsmanship back into people's beer glasses. So being disruptive is amazing, but that's got to come from a start and foundation point. You've got to be so clear about what you do and why that is different to your competition. And like people need to hear something 7 times before it's got to sink in. So massively clear about what you do. Secondly, and like a lot of people who hear this for the first time think it's a little bit counterintuitive. Building a fantastic brand or business is mind-numbingly boring. And like the entrepreneur always gets bored first. If you're building a brand, you've got to be mind-numbingly consistent over an extended period of time. If you chop and change how you look, what you stand for, what you do, like it's so difficult to take people on that journey with you. And the amount of entrepreneurs and founders that I'm going to change this, I'm going to launch this, and I'm going to launch this product, and that's coming in, and this extension is coming in. It's like, whoa, wait a second. Like your business takes up 110% of your mental bandwidth. It takes up maximum 0.1 or 0.2 of your customers' bandwidth. They don't need all this new noise. They don't need all this other things. Like the power of our brand is always inversely proportional to its scope. It's like everyone thinks being disruptive is fun and sexy and cool and exciting and high octane. It's some of those things, but more importantly than that, it is mind-numbing consistency and focus over an extended period of time and not launching too many different crazy things. And so that consistency people can buy into, and once they buy into that, you can take them on the journey, but you need to be consistent enough to take them on the journey with you. And then the final point is one that we've spoken about again, like risk is always proportional to ambition. So if you've got big ambitions and you need to be so calculated and so focused on how you take them, but you're going to have to be prepared to take a few risks.
How do you sell anything to anyone?
I think, and I'm going to be a bit objectionable here, I think that is completely the wrong question. And I think the best businesses don't focus that much on sales. And like the first 10 years of our business, we weren't focused that much on sales. Like, okay, if we make something that is absolutely fantastic, if we offer it at a reasonable price for what it is, if we've got a great brand to back it up, like those sales are going to happen. And the other question that I always get asked, and often get asked by journalists in the journey, is like, well, what size is your dog going to be in 5-10 years' time? Where are you going? And I would always answer in exactly the same way. It's like, I absolutely do not care, but I'll tell you what I do care about. What I care about with the business in 5 or 10 years' time is how do we look after the fantastic people that work in the organization? How do we continue to care and over-index on the best ingredients, the best processes? How do we live or die by what's in every single bottle? How do we keep our edge, our attitude, our spikiness? How do we kind of retain what's made us like build this business so far? Because I know if we do those things well, our sales number is going to be as good as it possibly can be, because for me, sales is a byproduct of doing all these other things amazingly well. So I don't care what my sales number is in 5 years. I care about how well we do this core key things, which are fundamental to everything we believe in. And if we do them well, we're going to be happy with the sales number. And if we don't, we're not.
I didn't feel you were being objectionable. I think you answered the question in a very good way, and I think it was a very good question, so go fuck yourself. All right then, so let's do the disruptive round. So, what is the single biggest risk you've ever taken?
I would say the one I spoke about, starting equity for punks when it had never been done before, when it cost us £100,000, when we had £10,000 in our bank account.
What is your most brutal life lesson?
Most savage life lesson? Nobody is going to care remotely as much as you do. And if you're CEO and if you're founder, this is a hell of a lonely thing. And like, it's going to be your strength of will, your strength of character, your resolve that gets you there. So if you get a good outcome, your team and everyone around about you, okay, they're going to help to a certain point, but like, it's on you. And just that realization. And one of my favorite business books is called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And I gift this book to so many founders. And there's one quote in that book that completely changed my approach to managing people. And I read it in 2014. And at that time, I just found myself getting so frustrated. Like somebody in Australia would mess up the canning line and the beer would be bad. Somebody in America would not open a location in time or give bad customer experience. Somebody in the UK would mess up the labels and beer that was supposed to be going to Finland and we couldn't sell it. And I was getting so frustrated about all of these things. And the quote in the Ben Horowitz book was, at a certain point in time, your company is going to do things that are so stupid you'd never thought you'd be associated with such incompetence. But to make matters worse, if you're CEO, it's all your fault. And the realization was just complete ownership. Okay, if somebody messes up in Berlin or London or Australia or America, like that person has been hired by someone I've hired. That person is operating a culture which I've set the tone for. That person is operating a system where I've set what the standards are. So anyone that does anything anywhere in the organization is a direct consequence of what I have done as a leader. So if something goes wrong anywhere, I can't be frustrated at any of my team. I can only be frustrated at myself. And just that total ownership led me to kind of lead the company in a very different way and with some amazing years after I had that insight. But like brutal insight, nobody's going to care as much as you do, and anything that happens in your organization, regardless what it is, regardless who did it, is 100% your fault.
What's the most disruptive thing anyone has ever said or done to you?
Inviting me on this podcast and to come here today. The clue is in the title.
This is a stroll in the park.
Okay, so I love challenging conventional wisdom. I love challenging the status quo, and I love finding ways to create businesses which is not the same as business as usual. And I think you find there's so many things that you think you should do, you're supposed to have as a business, which just don't add value. They add cost, they add complexity, they add bureaucracy. I'm really good friends with Greg Jackson, absolute genius. He founded Octopus Energy, and I was like hanging out with him, and he was like, yeah, James, I don't have a HR department. I was like, dude, you've got 8,000 people. I was like, yeah, what do I need a HR department for? They just get in the way, they slow us down, they make things clunky, and they take ownership away from the managers. Like, I want that manager to have that difficult conversation. I don't want something in the way. If you've got an HR department, they hire a recruitment department that just give you way more overhead than you actually need. So he's got 8,000 people, no HR director, no chief people officer, no people department. Loved it.
So decentralizing HR and making the managers responsible for their recruitment and looking after the staff. Yeah.
But just like every insight, every way something's supposed to be done, like if you can challenge that, you can find a competitive advantage. And like anyone got a business, you're always looking for a competitive advantage. And if you kind of follow the conventional wisdom, you're only ever going to get a conventional outcome. It's like all of our best innovations, ideas, initiatives have been when we've gone against conventional wisdom and we've got an unconventional outcome. And there's a quote that I love. I think it's if 90% or 95% of people think you're wrong, you're either gravely mistaken or about to make history.
What's your biggest failure or regret?
I think so many, and like everyone makes loads of mistakes when they're building a business, but I think there's different ways to make mistakes. And like, I hate it when people try and glorify mistakes and say, oh, well, it's a mistake, but you can learn from it. For me, the only thing you learn from a mistake or failure is you're not good enough and you need to up your game. And as savage that is, I think that's the case. And for me, the key thing is when you make a mistake, you've got to fix it incredibly quickly. And you've got a window of opportunity where you can fix it. But if you don't fix it, it's just going to hurt you more and more and more. And Sir Tom Hunter, who one of the most successful ever Scottish entrepreneurs, once said to me, I was debating whether I should fix a mistake that I'd made at that point in time or wait 6 months. And looked at me kind of quite sternly and with his kind of very Glaswegian accent said to me, James, if you were running a marathon, you wouldn't wait until the 22nd mile to take that stone out your shoe. So you realize you're going to make mistakes. Everyone does. Fix them incredibly quickly.
This isn't on my script. And I hope you don't mind me asking this. It's a bit more of a personal one, but I think it could be important. So right now, my dad is not good. And I know you recently had the passing of your dad. And I remember sitting with Andrew Tate and he said to me, you never fully become a man until your father passes away. And I remember feeling really triggered by that, thinking, no, I feel like I'm doing a decent job as a man. I'm quite scared right now with what could happen with my dad, and obviously you went through it, and you openly shared about it on your social media. Did that change you? Was that the final missing piece in becoming a man?
I'm not sure. It was like the toughest thing I've gone through. So I don't speak to my mom, and I've just been like so close to my dad, like all the way through my life. And my dad was a North Atlantic fisherman, so I spent a lot of time in the boat with him. And he still was working incredibly hard as a lobster fisherman. So he was catching lobsters every single day. And he went from healthy and catching lobsters to no longer with us in the space of 7 weeks with pancreatic cancer. That was last year in the summer, but I also lost one of my best friends, Dan, to pancreatic cancer in January last year. So that was two of them, and just like so sudden. And like so much of who I am is kind of came from my dad. So growing up in the fishing boats, that kind of work ethic, that discipline, that insistence on standards, that kind of was just inculcated into me from like such a young age. And yeah, it was incredibly difficult. And it's like, if somebody's had so much of an influence on you, like who are you when that person's no longer there? And like, it's a sad thing to say, I'm now less excited about achieving something successful because I can't share it with my dad. I'm less excited about doing an amazing thing because I can't share it with my dad. And it was so funny because he was like so old school and Scottish and kind of down to earth and just like focusing his lobsters. So I could like tell him we've done like a 200 million investment round, and he wouldn't even acknowledge it and just tell me how many lobsters he caught the next day. But just being able to share it with my dad was amazing. And here's the kind of insight that came from that. And like, I'm sure everyone here has lost somebody that's incredibly close to them. I'm sure everyone here has lost somebody very suddenly through cancer as well. It just kind of shows the kind of fragility of this life and the kind of briefness of our time on the planet. But just the odds of anyone being here is 400 billion to 1, which is this incomprehensible number. But you're far more likely to win the lottery every single week between now than you die than just be alive for the first place. So just the opportunity to be part of this, to be on this planet, to love and be loved, to make connections, to build things, to have rapport, to kind of have a family, to experience life on this planet is this incredibly precious thing. And I just wonder about seeing this kind of epidemic of kind of people struggling with kind of various different mental health issues, if people kind of truly understood that in the overall scheme of the cosmos, we're on this planet for the briefest like blink of an eye. And just the odds of us being here, like 400 billion to 1, more likely to win the lottery every single week between now and when you die than just to be born. So the chances of you being here, all the things that needed to happen 4,000 years ago in your lineage just for you to be here, the planet to be here. So miss my dad incredibly. So grateful to have had someone in my life who was so remarkable. I thought we'd have him for another 20 years, but just all of us just being here in this planet, being together, having friends, having family, doing things that you love is just such a privilege. And just to make sure that we don't take any of that and any of that time for granted, I think is such an important lesson.
What does the word disruptive mean to you?
Oh, I love that word. And I'm quite sad your podcast is called that, because if I did ever start a podcast, that would be my favorite word to do it. And like, for me, disruption is innovation, it's progress, it's excitement. It's like fighting to create something better than exists. And like, all the best businesses, all the best leaders, they've got that mission and they want to create something better. And you do that through disruption. You do that from rejecting the status quo, finding new and fantastic ways to do things. And I think that's been my kind of modus operandi as a leader. And it's a part of business and life that I find most exciting.
Ladies and gentlemen, James Watt.